Hi, welcome. We are at day 3 today of our campus party. So I hope you guys stayed up late last night with us when we had Al Gore, Tim Berners-Lee, and Vincef in the hour-long conversation last night. As most of you would know, Campus Party is a festival of ideas, innovation, forces for good, featuring local speakers from Australasia as well. So hi everyone again, I'm Vivian, the lead curator of Campus Party. So for this upcoming session, as you see, I've brought two of my very close friends to this session. So it's Kelley and Ellen from who are lead designers and creative directors. So one of the things that we're trying to chat about is about community living. So if you've seen the sessions brief beforehand, so today's session, we're going to discuss about the future of community living and why is that important. For example, when the pandemic hit, when the,
Can you say something?
like
Can you hear me?
Murphy's Law. Yes,
I
Kelley,
can't hear you.
You can't hear us.
Kelley, you try logging out and coming back in again. Yeah, try closing and coming back again. Kelley,
Okay, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, good. It's good now.
There's a bit of a echo. Do you want to check on yours?
Echo.
Yes.
I think it's better now.
Okay, unless I can put on a mic.
Yes, I think that would be better. So while Kelley just fixed her audio issue, I hope you guys have been around with us and doing all the stretches from Annie. I was trying to do some of them, and honestly, I never knew that it was going to be so hard doing yoga stretches just using a chair. So Annie will be back just later in the evening as well for another session of stretches, especially for those that are staying with us throughout this whole day of content. So as I was saying, I'm just about to introduce Kelley and Ellen. We're going to discuss about the future of community living. And why that matters. I think with the pandemic that happened, it really showed how our most vulnerable communities, like the migrant workers, care homes, refugees, or even low-income communities, were hit the hardest. And these the most vulnerable within us in the society, they went unnoticed during this health crisis. Even basic living conditions like housing was one of the key issues that most of the nations struggled to cope with. So that's what we really want to discuss about. How can we accommodate and solve things like this, and in the future, looking forward into the future, how would that change for us? So let me just introduce Kelley. Kelley is she's actually a trained architect, right? Who turned as a designer. Last year, she celebrated her 20th years of being in the design industry, one of our key pioneers. She was the creator of our country's first independent design magazine, Ish, and currently the creative lead of design and publishing consultancy, The Press Room. And Ellen, he's the founder of an architectural firm, AK+. His contributions is not just in architectural alone, but he sees that as solutions, especially for those in need, and how architecture should be perceived as a byproduct, with the main impact and influence is to help bring communities together. So yes, Kelley, maybe you want to start first and share about some of your existing work and what you have been up to.
So currently, I guess maybe a bit more relevant to the topic project I'm working on is actually it's a content creation project for a developer, and we are actually studying the future of living in general, but it really has a tendency of skewing towards a more community sort of living. And of course, also with the current COVID situation, the the future of living in general also has to somewhat cater to all this sudden sudden pandemic. Yeah, because a lot of this community living, they are currently kind of like already have this kind of co-working space inbuilt into like developments, but that is like not really working out with the current COVID situation. So it seems like while developers are studying how to create better shared spaces, because our apartments are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So your living space will be as minimal as possible, but there will be very vibrant sort of community space that people can use and all that. But your very small living space has to cater to the possibility of workspace because of this work from home situation that we don't know
Yes.
is going to happen anytime. Yeah. So I guess that in some way has a parallel to some of the migrant worker situation that we are also encountering right now, where they are all given very minimal living spaces, which in some way I think the challenge is how do you then maximize each of these sort of cubicle space that they are given to enable them to have some privacy, but at the same time be able to have to kind of be self-sufficient in that space, but their social activities should be then in a shared space, and that is where more design should actually be happening, and also of course the importance of programming.
So it's to really relook at what this community living is about, right? It's not just
Yes,
your
yeah,
typical
absolutely. Yeah. So
And-
I think the principles. I guess my point is that the principles of community living, the fundamental principle, be it whether it's a low end or high end or mid end, whatever you want to term it, I think the fundamentals are the same. Of which is that you keep a very practical, usable personal space that is sufficient to be flexible enough for work and play, and then work, live, play lah. I guess that's the buzzword right now for any kind of living. But how do you create exciting shared spaces?
Ellen, what are your thoughts as well? Like, this whole defining what community living is about.
Right. Yeah. Further along to what Kelley has just mentioned, we also have a few projects that revolves around how do you have this co-housing between the elderly, and then we also have the students, so students and elderly, and also the young families. So you have the children component, you have it's like a very tri-directional kind of synergy between the three groups, and how you bring them together. For us, we actually do it in a way that we have like condominiums, let's say, you have a private pool, you have the tennis courts, and everything. We can do away without those. So we're trying to actually, instead of having that, we have the shared kitchen, we have the shared dining spaces, we have even F&B from outside. So there's the ground floor is sort of like in a way that is open up. So you have urban farms, you have any kind of activity that can gel people together, and certain things that people, when they do, they can actually get some rebates. Like for the elderly, right? If they want to be involved in the urban farming, they can, and then they can get certain rebate from those things to pay their maintenance, utility bills. How condominium, they do charge a certain rate. So those are things, and students can actually get some kind of discount in the rental if they help out in the kindergarten, or if they help out in the nursery. So these are the things that we were looking at. How do you actually infuse this common facilities into very impactful facilities, I would say. I mean, purposeful. Yeah. So
there was one project that you both were both involved in, including myself, on rapid building to support the migrant community. Can you both share more about that whole experience behind it, and what exactly happened? So I know that it's not really a publicly launched project yet. So maybe share with us some of the inside stories and learnings from that project. Yeah.
Okay. No, I was very happy because I'm when I meet most of the people I work with, these professionals, they are smart people, And at the same time, made so what made so proud of me is that they actually they have good hearts. And like Kelley, when we asked her, immediately she just jump in, yes. So that's something that I felt that most of the architects nowadays, I think, and also professionals, right? I mean, like we all have big hearts as well. So that's kind of like make me proud a bit in terms of like doing this thing. And it was also thanks to Vivian, because you have been championing this idea of the with our foreign friends, and somehow or rather that seems to be very appropriate when the circuit breaker starts to kick in. And I thought that they might need how you predicted that things can get out of hand because of the conditions that how they live. So I thought that maybe that's where we can get together and start to do things. So when we hit it off, then also at the same time there's a request for it. So that's where we can get certain things out very fast. So it was quite a good thing. Vivian, maybe you want to share as well.
No, tell us. Yeah, no, you share it. So tell us like how many bits. What was it like? An overview of this project. Yeah.
Right. So it's a project in Kranji. I mean, like again, it's with the government. So it is like repurposing, readapting some of the facilities that they have. And then we actually put in so the brief do keep changing quite a fair bit, because from day one it was like a DIF, and then it became like CRF, which is a what do you call it? It's a recovery facilities. Then after it changed to becoming a temporary dorm. So it really fits in the needs of what's happening with the situation. I thought that was quite and our kind of like modules, kind of like the modular thing that we have been creating can adapt to that need. So it's quite versatile. I think that's what we need to do. And also because that time everybody was doing almost similar thing of this isolation facilities, and we're running out of certain materials. So we looked into using materials that's different, like timber. Not many people use timber in Singapore because of the fire regulations, and also plastics, because I see the feel of that is slightly more transient, is temporary. So I think that some of this product that can be used as a temporary measures can be adopted. I think I was very lucky also because at the same time my architectural community in other places have done the same. So I thought, okay, maybe we can actually bring it to Singapore and then try to adapt it to our regulations. And then from the timber model, we actually changed to because the brief changed to become a more permanent solution. So it becomes like a semi-permanent thing. So it becomes like with steel. So then these are the things that we keep changing to suit the requirement. Yeah. Maybe you can actually show some pictures. I think.
Yeah, maybe we share some photos first. And also to just let the audience know, the situation in Singapore was that our migrant community were our largest infection clusters. So it was amongst about 300,000 of them, and it was rapidly spreading among that community. So we needed to look for alternative solutions to move them out of the crowded spaces that they were living at, like what Kelley was mentioning. Yeah. So where's my screen? Yes. Yeah. Ellen, do you want to elaborate more? Like this is the timber structure that you were mentioning, right?
They go by modules. So Singapore has a need for having 10 packs and a 6 square meter each. So that's where we actually size up the modules, and the modules can grow from 6 to 8 to 10 packs per barrack, we call it. So all the materials are very easily fixed. So it's a panel. So you just bring the panel to the side and you just wrap around with the canvas, just to give it a bit of a privacy, and with the curtains to get in and out, and the beds and the fans. So we even did a lot of simulation in terms of how the air goes through and things like that. So I think it was quite interesting to make sure that they are really comfortable when it comes to this place.
So yeah, it's key, right? It's like what Kelley was mentioning as well. Like who are you designing it for? And what kind of spaces do you look at, and not just like the typical, okay, here's a bed, here's
Correct.
a sleeping area and that's it. But it's to simulate the whole thing, right? What kind of airflow goes through there, how they're feeling, how does it feel to be in there? Like, let's say if they're isolated there 24/7, what's the kind of emotions that would put people through, instead of just in a room and putting people there. Kelley, you were also involved in this project. What are some of your learnings? Because I wasn't as involved on the ground like you two. I was just rallying the community to like, hey guys, we need to do this. Everyone come together. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I mean credit should really mostly be given to Alan, because he's really the lead in this, and I mean I'm just assisting whatever he needs. So but I think some of the things that Alan has kind of like brought up and shared was about I think the first thing when he showed me the module, I said how can the ventilation got cross ventilation? So I think that is something that is quite important, because in COVID you cannot, it's the pass-through droplets. So the study of a proper cross ventilation is quite important. So while these modules are kind of like quickly put together, but it also has to be considered with a lot of practicality in light of this pandemic. And I think the other thing that might be interesting to share is I think the critical thing for this project is speed and material, which Alan has already touched on. But I think the hope is also that in line with this climate change thing and all that, we are hoping that the materials can be recycled after this use like the metal and the wood and all that, because these are all actually very I mean Alan has designed them to be modules, so they can be actually used for future purposes in other temporary structures or
farming as well.
So I think we do have a talk with them, like, okay, what's after this? So meaning that when the workers go back to their the new norm, into the new dormitory, then what do you do with this? Because this one can be used for a lot of for farming purposes. I think like a green a rooftop kind of structures can be deployed for that also. So we have plans for that. I think the key is that it's just very basic. It's something that is easy to clean. It's hygienic, because it's and it's just something that we have to consider when you design something. It's just going to be I think simplicity is very important in terms of like, so that the purpose from isolation to recovery to temporary dorm, I think that shows how flexible it is to change. So I think that that is important for us to design the future housing in that manner, in that same kind of thinking. So that's one thing that
that's for the temporary structure. And it's like it's more like reactive kind of building and design to suit that particular urgent need. So so those who are joining us live, do feel free to ask questions. We'll take them along the way as well, like Kelley and Ellen. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So on with like other than temporary structures, moving forward, it's like what happens right now. Okay, we're saying that yes, it's modular, it's temporary, but we need to think about what happens after that, right? To repurpose, reuse. But what about in the long haul, in terms of like looking at how community living can be part of social integration, and how can we design for such a purpose? Like in our permanent structures.
Design for diversity is a very important thing to do, and also for it being diverse, at the same time it has to be very specific. Like you have to like almost tailor-made to each of the user groups, interest group. So it cannot be just one solution fit for all. Even though that the product can be, the idea can be very simple, but the key is that it has to suit the need and the time. So the time factor is very important as well, because architecture is really about time, space, and identity. I think these are the three things that always govern what architecture is about. So I feel that that's something that we should move forward for when we design something, design particularly for that purpose, but then what are the flexibility? So architecture is sort of like a framework. And it allows organic growth. It allows things to be reflexive, and it makes things more meaningful when you actually think of the user, the end user, the people, and of course the context. So I think that's I think my learnings from designing for community in that sense. What do you think, Kelley?
I think maybe with this pandemic is a wake up call for many people, especially I think even for the authorities, it made them sit up because this a lot of these dormitory operators, they get away with saying, I met the minimum requirement, and so I'm not in the wrong and all that. But a lot of time, I think the key thing that they sadly, all these dormitory workers, they really provide the bare basic. Like, I give you a space to sleep, which is very bad. I mean, they never think about wellness. Because I think our migrant workers is also part of our community, and they deserve to be treated equally as well, to be entitled to a level of wellness. Wellness does not mean luxury or what. I mean, most of us even when we pursue our own wellness, it's not about having very expensive furniture or whatever. I don't think it is that, you see. I think in this day and age, mental wellness is really important for everyone, and it really cuts across is work, live, play, having social activities balance with your work life and all that. And that is not too much to ask for, even if whether you are a migrant worker or you're a Singapore worker or any kind, you see. So I think a wake-up call in the sense that not just revamping their dormitory spaces, their living spaces. I think it's also worthwhile to think about how they can be integrated in our society in a more inclusive way, because I think right now most of the migrant workers, on weekends they gather at Little India because where, I mean, they are not, where else do they go to? They don't know, and then our society, is also not in some ways, sadly, does not have this culture of being very accepting and all that. But so this wake-up call, besides the authorities, it should extend to the bigger, all the Singapore citizens as well, right? I mean, I think they should be seen as part of our community. And I think earlier, Ellen brought up a point that instead of just looking at how we can upgrade the dormitory, is about integrating them into our living spaces, right? And I think actually that has been happening here and there, like contractors who put them in like old shop houses, whatever. Actually, it is a correct strategy, but the problem is that they cram so many of them in there. It becomes unlivable, and then in an old shop house, there's only one toilet, and then you go and cram 50 workers there. Of course, you make them suffer in this kind of condition, and then the average citizen say, they're very dirty and all that. How do you expect them? You think they don't want to be?
And I guess the contractors are also not enabled to support and help, right? It's like, I think we all work in silos, right? If it's the dorm operators, they only do, okay, I need to provide this, right? And then the contractors, I have a work site there, so I need my guys near there. And then, everyone's working in silos. And then the NGOs are just being very reactive. This one doesn't have food, we send food. This one needs help. But it's not thinking of solution that, have everyone sitting on the same table and discussing like, hey, these are the problems that we are facing. We know this exists. We know that, but I have no resources to like find people to clean or add more toilets like in that. So we are always like finding solutions, I feel, on our own. Like the non-profit is finding, and you see the problem only from one side. You don't see the entire issue, right? And that's why we see issues like that. Sorry to cut in. Like I was just, very interested to to pursue this part as well, to find out your thoughts.
Yeah, but I think so. As I said, the strategy of inserting them into our all our living spaces is a correct one. But I think this is where the authorities can help to effect this better, which is that I mean, because they have a lot of very stringent checks in the dormitories to meet the minimum standard. But I think they should also put in this extra layer that allow contractors to say, okay, you can go and rent an old shop house or whatever, but they should do the surveying after that as well. What happened is that a lot of this falls through the cracks, and they just illegally, stash them in a shop house or whatever. But I think if this is properly done, it could be a much better proposition down the road, because because if these migrant workers live amongst us and all that, then naturally, they would feel much more as part of our community, and we can also embrace them much more, because they will be our neighbors and all this.
True.
Yeah, I think it's also the what you mentioned just now earlier, Kelley, about their wellness, and their education, and how things can be given a little bit more to them in terms of their mental well-being. And sooner or later, together with that component, right, I think the society will gel in better.
True.
Also, right?
Yeah. So we have one question from Ming. Thanks, Ming, for asking questions. So what is one thing that could be done on this matter to improve welfare? Do you want to show the sort of prototype of one of the ideas that you have, Ellen? And then I think it's also to add on, it's exactly what Kelley was talking about, right? To integrate them, not just like a very checkbox kind of integration, but true integration, not just like, okay, I'll build this here and that's it, or I'll approve this row of shop houses, but how can you program to make sure that they really live with us as part of our community? So Ellen, share about this one, and we can all chip in and see if this works and test this idea.
So because we have in Singapore, there's quite regulated in a way. Of course, we have certain GFA issues.
GFA is what?
Gross floor area. You cannot overbuild. There's a certain limit to what you can do, right? So what we can do, what we thought of for this particular project is on the top level there, there's actually for dormitory. It's the second.
These are the factory converted dormitory spaces, right? Okay.
Yes, correct. And we can take some of the floor areas from the factory itself to create bigger lofts, bigger grander entrance or grander showcase at the ground floor, and take those to pump it to create new circulation. And with this circulation, it allows a better security and a better integration, because when you circulate, right, and you have your communal kitchen, your dining in that area, then the workers and also the tenant from this place will be able to meet and to discuss, and will be able to get help. Will be able to offer help. And then the top floor is literally a rooftop garden in a way. So
where it's shared spaces for not just the migrant community alone, but to integrate it together as a workspace, right? Because it's also a factory, sort of like it has office spaces.
It's a production space as well. So it's like it's really about how the production set of ecosystem comes in together with the construction industry. I mean, and also the workers being there. So during the weekends, I can imagine community can go up separately from going through the front. They can go through the back to go up to the top, the rooftop, to do some activity, and migrant workers are there as well. So I mean, this is after the in a way that if things are good after the new the post-COVID situation, so then things can integrate again as per how we wanted. This is actually a project that was conceptualized long time ago. I thought it good to actually make a comeback in the future. And this is what I feel that integration should be. It's about how you meet, how you greet, how you bump into one another, how you mingle, how do you create that interaction, spaces for interaction to allow them to be part of our society.
I really like how you put it. Like, it's all these micro interactions, as if like if we want to see them as part of our neighborhood, as part of our community, then all these micro interactions need to happen. Not just like, oh, we walk past them and then they're like sleeping along the void decks. That kind. It's actually a very To me, that's my personal thoughts on that. Kelley, what were your thoughts? Would something like that work, or what do you have in mind when you were saying to integrate them?
I mean, of course, the model that Ellen created is in the ideal world. That means like sort of like in most buildings or whatever, that you carve out a certain space for them and all that. So this takes a bigger sort of planning and all this, but I think in a smaller scale is. What is most important, I think, is to create that psychological space to enable them to enter into the average Singaporean's life, because right now, I mean, let's face it, a lot of families are like, migrant worker, pull the kid away and say, don't walk too close and all that, which is very bad, right? And why does this happen? Because of that psychological segregation that we all have created, right? So this kind of psychological segregation led to physical segregation. So
Right.
it becomes like, oh, their territory is Little India. Then for the maids, the territory is Lucky Plaza and all that, So people are not welcoming when they let's just say they see, there are people who complain that maids are hanging out in neighborhood parks and all that. Why? I mean, what's wrong with them is it's a public park, you see. So
Because there's no other spaces, right, for them to go to, right? There's no recreational spaces for them, like you were saying.
yeah, because like I say, it's a psychological segregation that the society created that led to this physical barrier, you see. So I think it takes every one of us, which is why I think when Ellen championed this project, I was like, I'm more than happy to help, because I mean, it's also a self-reflective moment for myself, like, wow, we haven't been nice to these dudes. I mean, these guys, right, who has contributed so much to the building of our country and all this. So I think each of us really have to also wake up to remove this psychological barrier, this psychological segregation that we created in our minds. That manifested in a very negative physical sort of environment. So yeah, I mean, it really takes, like I said, every single one of us to open up our minds and open up our hearts to be able to solve this problem. It's not something that you see. I mean, as we know, architecture only happens when activities and human participate in architecture. It's just a dead building, right?
Yeah.
So I think what is interesting in this whole scenario of creating this architecture for the migrant worker is not just about creating the physical shell. If we don't think about how psychologically we are going to engage them, how we are going to enable them to create some kind of interaction and social activities in this with the rest of the nation, in these spaces. Otherwise, then it's very useless. So so I mean, I really wish that Singaporeans can, because of this pandemic, wake up and try to remove the psychological barrier towards our
Love that.
migrant workers.
Love that thinking, Kelley. I think that architecture has always, to us, right, it's never about a thing. It's never about the object. It is about events. I think that's the very meaningful thing about architecture to me. I really believe in like that. So I think the key now is that with what's happening, I think that's where we how do you create this wake up call? How do you create something that people will feel good and reconnect, realign, and then make that a more impactful architecture in Singapore?
So I think there's one question earlier from Ming, just to push a bit more about, because Kelly, you spoke about how it's the ideal world, of course, that blueprint that Ellen came up with. It would have been possible, right, to integrate them in our communities, in our workplaces. Yeah, so we don't have that physical barrier from where they stay and where the rest of the community is at. So who do you think we need to convince in order to have that ideal situation appear? He's asking, how can we adapt the idea into our current spaces? So I mean, okay, one part was of course getting the community to think and to look differently, right? But in terms of like in actual fact, who else do we need to be on board as stakeholders in order to push through such a plan? Like I know designers like yourself and Ellen are really very forward looking, right? And thinking beyond just like, okay, I just fulfill the tick boxes, and you want to do something more. So who else do you think would be able to help materialize this project?
Whether we like it or not, this kind of project, the government will always have to be the one taking the lead.
Championing it.
Yes, correct. Why I said, I mean, like the scheme that Ellen presented is, I say, I mean, it's very good and all that, but it's purpose built, yeah. So if you are a private building owner, you must be willing to say, I want to carve out this space, So, how many people will respond to a call to action like that? I think I'm not so idealistic, lah. But what I feel is that you see, in our city, there are also a lot of underutilized spaces. Like for example, we have quite a lot of HDB blocks that are completely empty, waiting to be redeveloped and all that. And this kind of development sometimes can take years or decades. So these HDB blocks that while awaiting to be renewed, why not let the migrant workers stay in? So they will also be embraced as part of the heartlanders, right? And you don't need to purposely spend a lot of money to go and purpose build these living quarters for them. You can use some of these old buildings that are awaiting development. So I think it really takes a lot of creative thinking to see how we can find these spaces to insert, right? I mean, for me, the most logical thing is to look at existing buildings first, how we can repurpose them, right? So, I mean, right now, for example, in this pandemic situation, overnight we have to create 40 over 1,000 bed spaces.
Yeah.
We did it. I mean, Singapore did it. We did it overnight, and with self-initiated project like this one and other means lah. So it shows that there are spaces, to make this happen. Yeah, and these are all existing spaces that house this 40 over 1,000 migrant workers, right? So that means if the government, look at our current resources, which are the buildings that can be repurposed and all that, I mean, it is possible. Of course, again, I would say this is a very idealistic way of thinking, but I mean, everything starts with courage and a dream, right? Because if nobody,
someone has to be that.
Yeah, someone needs to do that, right? I mean, a lot of, you see, the problem with how social issues happen is always that because a lot of people don't dare to touch it, don't want to touch it, that barrier of too idealistic. That is wrong. The more idealistic, the better, right? The better.
Yes.
But but it's about building that journey to achieve that. It's often very difficult and very long. But if you don't have that vision or that dream first, then it's never ever going to happen, right?
Correct.
So while some of us can envision this and want to push for this, like I said, I admit it will take a big support from the government to enable this kind of this kind of architecture to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's really very true. Sorry, Ellen, go ahead.
No, I find that the psychological barrier, I mean, that's something that is we all have to overcome. I mean, that's in a very idealistic way, I know, but look at other societies in the world. they are far more tolerant in many ways. So I think that that's something that we can start to learn. I mean, this is a time to it's a recovery. It's for us to actually unlearn and relearn new
Yes.
things. And I love it because this is sooner or later we are going to come to this. We have to face the facts. There are people who are suffering and the people who is not doing well. We got to help them. And also helping ourselves in a way. But I think that is an important message that is coming out of this series of situations that has happened.
You know, the irony that I see in this is that, in Singapore, in HDB flats, you have quota, right? Like, oh, you must have 70% Chinese, 15% Malay, and all that. And the whole idea of that is so that you don't create segregation, right?
Yeah.
You want a united community, regardless of race, language, and religion. I mean, the government is so meticulous in ensuring that, but they forgot. They create this whole cluster of, we have 200,000 migrant workers in Singapore. We created a big, segregation that these 200,000 must live outside and alone on their own. Cannot, right? So I mean, like, maybe you must think about in future, like every heartland, you also must take in a certain percentage of migrant workers, right? So that they are all, scattered in our community, and this is how you can ensure unity and that they are part of the society instead of like chuck them in woodlands and tuas so far. And how can, right? That is not going to work.
Yeah, it's exactly what you were saying, right? It's like, because when we try and put them in, I mean, many years ago, like there's always been all these debate about having migrant workers dormitories in residential areas, and the reaction has always been very extreme on both ends, right? Because I think the perception, the psychological perception is also like, oh, you're bringing 10,000 of them in a huge dormitory, but it's not like what you were suggesting, into underutilized spaces that already exist within the fabrics of our neighborhoods, and putting them in there and integrating them as part of it. But it's like the psychological barrier didn't stop. So when they wanted to bring them in near residential areas, people are like freaking out and saying that no, it's like it's very different as compared to if we change the narrative on saying like, oh, we're putting them in underutilized spaces, and then slowly putting them in whether is it shop houses that's near, and things like that, and bring people together to make this work, instead of like doing a checkbox like, okay, we need them there now, like go. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, I mean, it's a vicious cycle, because the more you try to segregate them, the more the average Singaporean will like, no, don't put them in
That's
my community. Then we are going to be stuck in this forever, you see. But if there is a ruling, like how they so strictly advocate in HDB blocks of quotas, then you can scatter them around, and insert them, so that it's a much more organic way of integrating them into our society.
That's what I meant by organic framework. So there's the government should take that initiative to create a framework that allows things to grow organically. Then in that matter, right, the whole city will become more vibrant, more meaningful, and more everything, because it's like the fact is that it will grow organically. So it's not so polished. It's not so like everything is like very curated. Certain things, yes, there are parts in the city we have to curate it properly, but there's certain things that allow things to grow naturally, and that is the richness of the city. So that we see the different sections of the city becomes very, it grows. So that's what we want. We want people to grow healthily, and we want people to grow very mindfully in terms of how inclusive society is. That's really the next thing.
Exactly.
Because we can't live in a not inclusive world.
And beyond like just the migrant communities, I mean, this problem that we have in Singapore because of the pandemic, like in our region as well, right? There's like the refugee situation all around. So I guess this kind of like organic framework would also work for not just this particular migrant versus the rest of the community, but in other parts as well. whether is it the low-income families, like in this kind of situation, do you think we should also adopt this form of organic integration and start looking at this from design perspectives as well?
Absolutely. Like, condominiums has been very secured. There's always a wall around it. Why can't we think about that fence? Why can't we redefine the fence? Why don't we actually break it to make it more integrating to everybody? There must be some sort of certain thing, like, of course you want condominiums to be safe. It can be controlled through the lifts, but there's a lot of ground floor spaces, and it's all fenced up in most of the situations in Singapore. I mean, I can understand that. I mean, there's a long history of how the development is, but to make things anew and fresh, and to make things exciting, in the urban planning wise and the urban design wise, we should rethink about all these things. We should rethink about how do you break the wall to integrate people.
Yeah, and I think on that note, just to add on to what Alan has saying, I think the authorities, URA, is taking a lead in this. So they are encouraging privately owned public spaces. So which means that if you're a developer, you carve out certain, be it a condominium or a shopping mall, whatever, you carve out a certain space to give it to the public, like you build a fountain or something, for kids to play. They give you some incentive, you see. And these spaces are often, more often than not, beneficial to all, because I mean, just give you a random example of the new mall PLQ. They have, they carve out a big publicly owned space for fountains for kids to play and all that. And it really created a difference to the whole Paya Lebar MRT station. When I sit there and I observe the space, I'm really impressed, because before that it's quite dead. People just walk to the MRT, then they go to the SingPost Mall and all that. It's a boring space. And so, I mean, good cities are all about creating vibrancy. So by just simply carving out that privately owned space to give it to the public, it helps everyone. The more people go to PLQ, more people go to the mall, and then there's residents there, there is offices there, and all that. The whole space simply comes alive and benefits everyone. You see, so I think there are some good policies that the authorities are pushing. So I think that there has been considerations in this area.
Happy to hear that.
It's I know, right? This whole notion of public spaces need to change. And hearing that, now that you mentioned that, that public space in Paya Lebar, it's part of that. I never saw it that way, but when on weekends, and then you see how the community comes together, right? It's not just like, the migrant community, the domestic helpers, but it's just everyone that's enjoying the fountain, the sitting area, and interacting with one another. So I think all these are very important. So now that it's not just, even if private sector can drive this, I think that would help, move social integration as well, not just in terms of but look at the walls, the fences that connect in between. Yeah, that's really amazing.
I think developers are definitely seeing the value in these privately owned spaces, and I mean, some of the clients that I work with, they're actually very very open to these ideas and embracing these new sort of typologies.
Yeah, let's change the game a bit. I think that's important.
I mean, we definitely need people like you both to even, show the blueprint, or rather start putting their images, because I'm a firm believer of how pictures really tell a lot more. So we definitely need people like you guys to start drawing things out and showing, and then championing for it before we can start moving all these pieces together. Yeah, so thank you so much for this session. It's been very interesting. We started with just trying to talk about future of community living and the migrant community, and yeah, now it became also about relooking at private public spaces, and the walls that connects each buildings, and about
More like breaking down the walls.
breaking down, correct, true.
Yeah.
Breaking down, and fostering collective experiences and social mixing. That's amazing. Thank you so much to both of you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. So we would have more sessions coming up. We'll take a short break for now. But Unconference is happening non-stop for the rest of the day. Please head over to the Unconference schedule on the tab. If you're on our website, please go to the tab. If you're on our Slack channel, please go to the Unconference X Slack channel. We'll be back shortly with more content. And yes, and tonight's session on the global stage, you'll be Edward Snowden, who will be with us for 1 hour talking about his work so far and updates from him. I'm personally very excited for that session. So please stay with us, and we'll see you guys all soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.